Okay, Be'ezras Hashem. Today's daf is Daf Lamed Zayin, and we will begin on Daf Lamed Zayin Amud Aleph, about 5 lines from the top. So, before we begin, I just want to make clear the two concepts you have to know. If you have these two concepts clear in your head, then the whole daf is very easy. The first concept is what Rabbi Akiva darshaned in our Mishnah from Mishras. Rabbi Akiva darshaned in our Mishnah that if you have a piece of challah, piece of bread, and you dip it into wine, if the Nazir eats that challah dipped in wine, he gets malchus. Now, it's talking about where the wine is, let's say, 75% of a kazayas. Really, in order to be chayiv, Nazir drinking wine has to drink a kazayas of wine, which is about 1.25 ounces. But let's say this bread was dipped in 75% of a kazayas of wine. So you have challah and bread with 75% of wine. So they combine. So the concept is called heter mitzaref le'isser. Hi, Sheldon. We just began. Daf Lamed Zayin. So again, one concept is called heter mitzaref le'isser. When you have a little bit of wine taken together with a piece of challah, the wine itself doesn't have the shear that a nazir is usher on. But if you combine it with the challah and the nazir eats it, he gets malchus. That is called heter mitzaref le'isser. And Rabbi Akiva said that din applies only by Rabbi Yochanan explained Rabbi Akiva's opinion in the Mishnah that din of we can make the heter, the challah, into a davar aser is only by nazir, not by anywhere else. Anywhere else, you must have the shear of the isser in order to be chayiv. So, for example, if you take a piece of chaylev, of, let's say, treifa fat, with kosher fat, and a half a zayas of each, and pop them into your mouth, you won't say that the kosher fat becomes treif. No, you only ate a half a zayas of treifa fat. But here, you're combining, let's say, a half a zayas of, or 75% of a kazayas of wine with bread. The bread becomes aser. So if the nazir eats a wine, a kazayas of that, he's chayiv. That's called heter mitzaref le'isser. The next point you have to know is something called tam ke'ikar, which means, like you have those seltzers, the flavored seltzers, which have the taste of lemon or raspberry or whatever it is. Sometimes you can have something called tam ke'ikar, which means, let's say I take grapes and pour water all over the grapes, and then take out the grapes. In the water that's remaining, there's the taste of wine in there. There's the taste. It's not actual wine. There's the taste of grapes in that water. That's called tam ke'ikar, and that's the taste is as if the main isser is present, and that's also aser. But here, tam ke'ikar means you actually had a kazayas of grapes. You had a kazayas of grapes giving off their taste into the water. So that is called tam ke'ikar. So that
doesn't it make a difference how much water we're talking about? Is it the same for a barrel as a cup?
I would think, well, it becomes, as long as it doesn't become bottle. So if I take a cup of a regular coffee mug and put some grapes in there,
then take the grapes out.
And then take the grapes out.
Right.
So then the nazir can't drink that water.
Right, but if I do it in a barrel,
so then
take the grapes out and then take a drink, it's not a problem.
Not a problem, right? Because then it's bottle.
Okay.
Tam ke'ikar, let's say, let's put it in another situation, which is more common. You have a goyish pot. A guy, your coworker has a goyish pot, and you want to cook your kosher meat in the pot. Well, there's taste in the walls of the pot from his tray for food, and that's going to go into your kosher meat. So the taste of the tray for meat is going to go into your kosher meat. So therefore, you can't eat that meat cooked in a goyish pot. That's called tam ke'ikar. But then again, there's the kazai. So now we go into the Gemara. We're just beginning the Gemara Daf Lamed Zayin Amud Aleph. Amalei Abaya. Abaya said to Rav Dimi and tried to understand Rabbi Akiva's opinion in the Mishnah. Mimai, how do I know the high Mishras when the Chumash says that the Nazir is not allowed to eat soaked bread, so to speak? It's coming to teach us the din leheter mitzaref le'isser, that bread combines with the isser, and even though you don't have the kazayas of Isser to get taken together with the heter, that's what the Chiddush of the Chumash is teaching you, that the Nazir is Asr to that. Maybe it's teaching you something else. Dilma litin tam ki ikar hu da Asr. Maybe it's coming to teach you the concept of tam ki itzer. It's teaching you a totally different thing. Not that the Torah is talking about soaking bread into wine. The Torah is talking about putting grapes into a coffee mug and then having water absorb the taste of the grapes and then removing the grapes. That's the Torah is teaching you. And there's a big difference, because tam ki'ikar means because you originally had more than a kazayas of grapes in that water. And that's a lesser of a chiddush. So the Gemara just asked, why is Abaya asking this question? Ulabaya, according to Abaya, mi'ikara kakash le'mai dekama Ravdimi. Abaya was questioning. Ravdimi said that the pasuk of Mishris is teaching you heter mitzaref le'isser. And Abaya was saying, why is it only by Nazir? It should be by every din in the Torah. Even if you eat the chalev and shuman, bad fats and good fats, why don't we say heter mitzaref le'isser? The komoisav le'halan to yufte. And Abaya was taking Ravdimi to town by asking him all bunch of questions, saying that this din of heter mitzaref le'isser should not only be by Nazir, but should be by everywhere else in the Torah. And then now he's saying it shouldn't even apply by Nazir either. Now he's trying to say litin tam ki'ikar, that the whole point of the Chumash is not talking about heter mitzaref le'isser. When there's no kazayas, the Nazir is not usher. It's only talking about something else, tam ki'ikar. So Abaya made a 360 in his opinion. So the Gemara says Abaya could make a 360. Basa Deshanale, after Ravdimi answered all those questions, Amalei, now Abaya said, no, maybe heter mitzaref le'isser doesn't even apply by Nazir. Dilma litin tam ki'isser who could also. Maybe it's teaching you the concept of tam, the taste, is like the main thing, and that's the whole point, that the Nazir is only usher only if a situation of tam ki'ikar, but not by heter mitzaref le'isser. Look at the Tanya. Like I explained, what is tam ki'ikar? Because the Brisa says that that's exactly what the word mishras. Mishras doesn't mean you're soaking challah in the wine. Mishras means you're soaking grapes in water and then pulling out the grapes. Litin tam ke'ika, that Chumash is telling you, the Brisa is telling you, that's teaching you tam ke'ika. She'im shara anovim b'mayim. If you soak grapes in water and then you remove the grapes out of the coffee cup, v'yesh tam b'yayin, and there has a taste of wine, chayev, then the Nazir cannot drink that water. Mikan at the dodin, then this Brisa goes on and says that this din of tam ki'ikar is not only by Nazir, but this din of tam ki'ikar applies by every other isser in the Torah. Mikan at the dodin kol isser in Shabbat. Every isser in the Torah has this concept of tam ki'ikar. That means you don't have to eat the isser item itself, but even the taste of the isser, even though the isser is not there anymore, but you can taste it, it becomes asr. Because just if you say tam ki'ikar applies by Nazir, which is Nazir is the lightest of the isurim of the Torah. It certainly applies by more strict isurim of the Torah. Let's take a look. Uman Nazir, the grapes of a Nazir. And the isur of Nazir is she'ein isura olam. It's never asur forever to Nazir to eat grapes. It's only for 30 days. The ein isura isur na. And a Nazir is not usher prohibited from benefiting from the grapes. He just can't eat it, but he could benefit from it. Let's say make an erev tachumin with this grapes. So he could benefit from the grapes. He just can't eat it. And the yesh heter yisuri, eventually, or if he goes to the rabbi and he says, I don't want to be a Nazir anymore, I made a mistake becoming a Nazir, we say that you don't, the rabbi could undo the Nazir. So therefore, the lightest isser on this grape is the Nazir isser on the grape. And in there, the Torah said, also by tam kika, the Torah is very strict. The taste of the grape is like the main grape. So then we'll say the same thing by other isurim in the Torah. Klaya kerem. Let's say the grape was klaya kerem. How does a grape become klayim? Let's say you planted a piece of wheat, a piece of barley, and the grapes all together, and out grows this grape which has the taste of wheat and barley in it. So that is a kalai hakerem. She yisurin isur oilam. That's an isur that remains forever. The yisurin isur no, and you cannot benefit from that grape. That's an isur forever. They ain't heter yisurin. There's no way to undo that. Once a grape is usur as klaim, it's usur forever. So the brisa continues. Ein adin shiasa tam keikar, and certainly you should make tam keikar by klayim. And huadin la'arla. That same thing should apply by arla b'shtayim. If you have a grape that's arla, it also should be usur tam keikar. That means if it applies by Nazir, it applies also by a grape of Klaya Kerem. It applies also by a grape of Arla, because Arla is also at least has two strictness more than Nazir. And the fact that Arla is Asa Bahana, and and there's no heter to make an Arla, a grape that's Arla, not Arla anymore. So that's what the Brisa says. So the question, this ends the question of Abaya. How do you know Mishras is talking about dipping the challah in the wine? Maybe Mishras is talking about the scenario of putting grapes in water and then pulling out the grapes, and it's teaching you the tam ke'ika, but not the more bigger chiddush called heter mitzdaref le'isser. Answers the Gemara, right. You have a brisa to say that Mishras is teaching you tam ke'ika. You're right. Amaluhu hamani rabbanan. That brisa goes according to Rabbanan. Rabbi Bo kama Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Kiva was teaching you that Rabbi Kiva learned. Rabbi Akiva learned heter mitzdaref le'isser from that pasuk of Mishras. Rabbanan learned tam ke'ikar. Rabbi Kiva learned heter mitzdaref le'isser. So the Gemara says, where did Rabbi Kiva? Hey, Rabbi Kiva, what Rabbi Kiva are you talking about? Rabbi Kiva dahacha. Are you going to say that you're talking about the Rabbi Kiva in our Mishnah that says clearly of heter mitzdaref le'isser? The Tanam, because our Mishnah says, Rabbi Kiva says, afila share pita beyayin. Even if you take your piece of challah, if the Nazir took his piece of challah and dipped it in wine, the yesh boy kedei l'tzaref kazayas, and there's somewhere a kazayas in that piece that he's going to eat, chayiv, the Nazir gets liable for eating that piece of challah. So how do you know that? So the Gemara understood that maybe, what did Rabbi Kiva teach us? Rabbi Kiva taught us that if you have a little bit of wine, let's say a half a zayas of wine, and the other half is bread, they combine together to become asa to the Nazir. And that's what the Chiddush of Rabbi Akiva had to mitzaref le'isser. So the Gemara says, Mamai, how do you know that's the point of Rabbi Akiva? Dilma hu de'ika kazayas bina. Maybe Rabbi Akiva is talking about a situation where the Nazir dipped his bread into wine that had the shear of kazayas wine in there. So he's eating wine, and there's a shear of kazayas wine in that bread. So he doesn't need the bread to make it a kazayas. The wine itself had enough of a kazayas. So then the chitem, if you're going to ask a question, if that's the case, that he dipped it in a kazayas of wine, my lemembra, what's the novelty Rabbi Kiva is eating? Even if he drank the wine without the bread, yechayev, so what is dipping the bread make it worse? So no, la puke mitanakama. Maybe Rabbi Akiva was just trying to push away the Tanakama. The Tanakama holds that the Nazir is asur until the Ama Achi Yishter Revius Yain. The Nazir is asur until he drinks 3.3 ounces of wine, which is a Revius, what you have in a Kiddush cup. So Rabbi Kiva just wanted to say that no, the Isser is not a Revius Yain, but the Isser is drinking 1 ounce of wine, 1.25 ounces of wine. That's asur for a Nazir. And sometimes the way to drink that is dipping it into wine. But really, Rabbi Kiva requires the Nazir, in order to be liable, he has to drink the entire kazayas of wine. We won't say heter mitzdaref le'isser. So where do you see that Rabbi Akiva said heter mitzdaref le'isser? So Ella, we have it clearly in the brisa. Rabbi Akiva the brisa. There's a Rabbi Akiva in the brisa. The time we learned in the brisa, Rabbi Akiva oimer Nazir sheshara pita beyayin. Here it's clearly the Nazir dipped his piece of challah into wine. V'achal kazayas, he ate a kazayas mipas u'miyayin. Taking together the bread and the wine. Let's say the wine was 75% of a kazayas. The other 25% of the kazayas was the bread. Then chayav. So you see clearly in the brisa, which is a brisa is more elaborate than the Mishnah, is Rabbi Kiva is actually teaching you the din of that heter mitzdaref le'isser. First, he's teaching you the din that in order for a nazir to be chayav, he has to drink a kazayas, and sometimes, even if you don't have a kazayas of wine, but if you have kazayas taken together with the bread, you have 75% of a zayas of wine and 25% of bread, they combine to make it also for the Nazir, and that's learned from the pasuk of Mishras. So now the Gemara is going to say, okay, so now Rabbi Kiva has this new chiddush, one step above, that says heter mitzdaref le'isser by Nazir, but not anywhere else, only by Nazir. But then, how did Rabbi Akiva know tam ki'ikar, the lower chiddush? That lower chiddush has to come first before you teach me heter mitzdaref le'isser. So that's the next question. Amalei Rav Acha b'rei Rav Ivel Rav Ashi, Rabbi Akiva, according to Rabbi Akiva, The kamoikim le'lahai v'chol mishras. He uses the v'chol mishras lehetem mitzdaref le'isser. That teaches you hetem mitzdaref le'isser combines with isser. Litin tam ki'ikar menole. How does he know of the concept of tam ki'ikar? That's the lower chiddush. That must be learned from somewhere else in the chumash. That tam ki'ikar. So yalef mibasa b'chol. You probably guessed it. From cooking milk and meat. If I cook kosher meat in milk, and then I pull away the meat, the Torah says I did an aveira by cooking, but also by drinking that milk. Wait a second, there's no meat in that milk, right? And there's only the taste of meat in that milk. And the Torah says it's asar. Lav tam ba'almahu. There's only asar because there's taste of milk in that, taste of meat in that milk. Ba'asar. So we see the taste is tam ke'isar. Then so also, but the rest of the Torah, we say tam ke'ikar. So the Gemara asks, Rabbanan, why do they need Nazir to teach you the din of tam ke'ikar? And that's what Mishras is teaching you. Mishras, according to Rabbanan, is teaching you the scenario of the grapes with the water, and you're pulling out the grapes by the Nazir. Tam ke'ikar I know from Basa B'chalav. So the Gemara says, Rabbanan Basa B'chalav loy gamrinahu. They hold you don't learn tam ke'ikar from Basa B'chalav. The chidushu, the whole concept of Basa B'chalav, is a very novel din in the Torah. So the Gemara says, "My chidushay." What is the novelty of Basa B'chalav? Are you going to say the Hailukudei v'Hailukudei Shari? That the novelty of the Basa B'chalav is there's nothing usher. You can eat meat alone, kosher meat alone. You can drink kosher milk alone. It's the combination of both. V'hadei adadi usher, and when you combine them together, they become asar. So that's a novel thing, novel din in the Torah. Kalayim nami. Well, the whole concept of kalayim is taking two things, wheat and barley, and mixing it together. Each one by itself is permitted. Each one by itself is permitted. And together they are asar. So what makes Basa B'chalav such a big chiddush that if we know tam ke'ikar over there, I would not extend it to learn it elsewhere in the Torah? Basa B'chalav is such a unique aveira in the Torah. So what makes it unique? The answer is because the Torah said it's not just about the taste. It's how the taste got into the milk. Because if the taste got into the milk by soaking meat in milk for 24 hours, the milk does not become asur min Torah. Even though one could say if you soak milk, the meat in the milk for 24 hours, and then you pull out the meat, that milk is going to taste from meat, and yet it's not asur min Torah. The Torah says only if it's cooked, the milk is cooked with the meat, then it becomes asur. So that makes it like a novel concept and such a chiddush that we could say tam ke'ikar only applies by the mitzvah of Basa B'chalav, not anywhere else. That's why I need Nazir to teach me that tam ke'ikar applies by anywhere else in the Torah. That's what the Rabbanan will say. So let's read it inside. Ella, the reason why Basa B'chalav is very novel, the itari like kuli yom b'chalav. If you soak meat in milk for a whole day, shari, you can drink the milk. Umavasha le bishule, but if you cook the milk in the meat and then you're trying to drink the milk, asur, it's asur. So therefore, it's a novel thing of Basa B'chalav. So we don't learn tam ke'ikar for kol Torah kula from Basa B'chalav. You need Nazir to teach you tam ke'ikar. That's what the Rabbanan learned. So the Gemara asks back. So Rabbi Akiva, why Nami Rabbi Akiva, who learned tam ke'ikar from Basa B'chalav for kol Torah kula? Rabbanan are correct. Basa B'chalav chidushu. Basa B'chalav is such a novel aveira in the Torah. You can't extend it for every isser in the Torah that you're going to say tam ke'ikar. Ella, says the Gemara, yes, Rabbi Akiva has another source of tam ke'ikar, and we just discussed this. Yalef migule goyim. The Chumash describes that the pots belonging to goyim, the Chumash describes when the Yidden took over the Midyanim, they took over their pots and pans. The Torah describes that Hashem said, don't cook your food, kosher food in those pots. So the Torah says that you have to kasher those pots, to take out the taste, the goyish tray for food that's in the walls of the pot. And we see that there's a concept of taste, a taste of goyish food, taste of tray for food going into your food unless you kasher it. So that's from there you see tam ke'ikar, and we extend it in kol Torah kula. Yalaf miguule goyim. We learn it from kashering kashering the unkosher foods of goyim. The Amar Chraman, the Torah says, kol dava sheyava be'esh. Anything that was already that absorbed through fire in the walls of the pot, let's say a goy cooked tray for food in the pot, the Torah says you have to kasher that pot. That's what the Torah says. So what makes it usher? If you clean the pot, why can't I cook kosher food? Remember, teaching you that it's also the goyish food that's in the pot. But what's in the pot? Nothing. I cleaned it. Lav tama ba'almahu. The only thing that's in the walls of the pot is the taste of the goyish food, the tray for food in the pot. Ba'asr, and the Torah says that's asr. Unless I kasher the pot, I cannot use the pot. So we see tam ki'ikr is a concept in the Chumash. So we apply it in kol Torah kula. That's why in any case, in all over, there's no difference. We all say tam ki'ikr, that the taste is like the main item itself, and therefore Rabbi Kiva learns from Geulei Goyim, from kashering pots. That's how you know tam ki'ikr is asr. The kam ki'ikr is also in kol Torah kula. Therefore, Mishras by Nazir teaches you one step higher, that heter mitzaref le'isra. Now the Gemara says, okay, why did Rabbanim learn tam ki'ikr from kashering food? Amalei, so Rabbanim will tell you, hasam chidushu. Kashering the pots is a big chiddush. Why would the Torah want you to kasher the pots? The taste is repugnant, because the habachol Torah kula noisin tam lebagam muta. Every time something gives a repugnant taste into kosher food, the kosher food is permitted because it's a repugnant taste. But by the kashering of the pots that the Torah talks about, the Torah says it's asr. Why would the Torah say that? Why can't they cook kosher food? The guy cooked his food maybe a month before, and now the Yid wants to use it. Why should it be asr for the Yid to use that pot? Even if it gave in taste into the Yid's kosher food, it would only give a repugnant taste into the food. So that's Gemara asks back. That's a chiddush. Why did the Torah say to kasher the pots? It's going to give a repugnant taste. Rav Huna bar Chia explained. The Torah only asked you to use the goyish pot only if the goy just used it, if it's 1 day old. There, it's not going to give a repugnant taste. Actually, the guy just used it, so the taste that's in the walls of the pot is still fresh. So if you're going to cook your kosher food, the taste is going to go into your kosher food. And the Torah said, don't use that pot, kasher the pot first. So we see that tam ki'ikr from the kashering of the food. Rabbanan said no. Even if the guy cooked his food that day in the pot, once it got into the wall of the pot, it already started spoiling, or it loses its original taste. It's a repugnant taste, a little bit repugnant, and therefore, nevertheless, the Torah still wants you to kasher it. So maybe it's only a chiddush by tam ki'ikr, only by kashering pots, but nowhere else in the Torah. That's why the Torah, according to Rabbanan, had to tell you the same concept of tam ki'ikr by Nazir also. When the Nazir puts when the Nazir puts grapes in a cup, a coffee mug with water, and then you remove the grapes, the Nazir can't drink the water because tam ki'ikr applies by Nazir as well. It wasn't enough by saying it by Geulei Goyim. But according to Rabbi Kiva, the fact that the Torah says kasher pots, that teaches you tam ki'ikr is also l'chol Torah kula, and therefore heter mitzaref le'isra, you learn one step above. You learn heter mitzaref le'isra by heter mitzaref le'isra by Nazir. So the Gemara is going to ask one more important question. Amalei Rav Acha b'der va'ayvel Ravashi midrabanan nishvel Rabbi Kiva. From the way the scope of the way the Rabbanan learned Mishras to teach you tam ki'ikr, we could say, why didn't Rabbi Kiva learn it the way the Rabbanan? That means, why didn't Rabbi Kiva extend it like Rabbi Akiva? In other words, Rabbanan learned from Mishras that tam ki'ikr, and from Mishras by Nazir, tam ki'ikr applies kol Torah kula. So Rabbi Kiva, who learned from Mishras heter mitzaref le'isr, why didn't he say that applies to kol Torah kula? Why did Rabbi Kiva, according to Rabbi Yochanan, limit it that heter mitzaref le'isr only applies by Nazir? That's the Gemara's question. Why didn't we learn the way Rabbanan learned Nazir? Why didn't Rabbi Kiva learn Nazir the same way? Lav Amri Rabbanan Hai Mishras Listen Tam Ki'ikr. Rabbanan say that Mishras teaches you Tam Ki'ikr by Nazir. And mekan ato lamed l'chol yisurin shebetoina. And that teaches you kol Torah kula tam ki'ikar. If it says by Nazir, it applies in kol Torah kula. So Rabbi Kiva nami de komoikelim lahamishav leheter mitzdaraf li'isar. According to Rabbi Kiva, Mishras teaches you heter mitzdaraf li'isar. Leima, let him say the same thing. Mekan ato lamed l'chol yisurin shebetoira. So let Nazir be the teacher for kol yisurim shebetoira. You don't have to eat the entire zayis of the isser, but heter mitzdaraf li'isar. So, for example, if I would say by eating non-kosher fats, a half a zayis of non-kosher fat, and swallow it together with a half a zayis of kosher fats, it should say that's also to do, because the heter becomes like the isser. But Rabbi Akiva said, no, that din only applies by the challah with the wine, but it doesn't apply in kol Torah kula. It only applies by nazir. Why did Rabbi Akiva say that? So the Gemara says, Amalei, Rabbi Akiva will tell you, we shouldn't have a nazir v'chatas beis ksubim haboim kechad. Because there's two psukim that teach you the same idea of heter mitzdaraf li'isser. And once there's two psukim that teach you the same idea, we don't, it becomes superfluous. The Torah says only these two we say heter mitzdaraf li'isser, not in kol Torah kula. Nazir hada amra, we say heter mitzdaraf li'isser by nazir. Chatas mahi, what's the case of chatas where heter mitzdaraf li'isser? The time we learned to the brisa, kol ashiyiga b'vsari yiglish, anything that touches a carbon chatas meat. Let's say you have a little piece of carbon chatas meat, and if another meat touches it, that meat that touches the chatas meat becomes like the chatas. Yochal afilu shloi bala. The brisa says even if it didn't absorb any of the chatas meat, the second piece of meat becomes like a chatas. Talmud loime bivsara. Only if it if it absorbs some of the chatas meat, then that meat becomes like the chatas meat. Yikdosh, what does it mean, yikdosh? Lias kamara, that meat becomes like the chatas meat. Shim psula, if you can't eat the chatas meat, you puzzle, it'll also become puzzle. Then kishera, if it's a kosher piece of meat, let's say it's a shlamim, it should be eaten like a chatas meat. We don't treat it as a shlamim. Since the shlamim now absorb chatas meat, it could only be eaten by a kohen and only eaten for that day and that night. Al kapanim, what you do see that even if the chatas meat goes a little bit into the shlamim meat, the shlamim becomes the chatas, even though you only have a lesser of a zayis of chatas. So we see the concept of heter mitzdaraf li'isser by carbon chatas, and we see it by nazir. So Rabbi Akiva says, since the Torah said it in two specific places, heter mitzdaraf li'isser, you can't say that applies in kol Torah kula. So the Gemara says, Rabbanan says that teaches you that pasuk of chatas is not teaching you heter mitzdaraf li'isser. That pasuk is teaching you tam ki'ikar, and yet. So now Rabbanan have tam ki'ikar by nazir and tam ki'ikar by chatas. Why do you need both? Why do we need both? Why don't we say that tam ki'ikar only applies by nazir and by chatas, nowhere else in the Torah? So the Gemara says, Tzricha, I need that. Because of Rachmana gabe chatas, if the Torah only wrote that tam ki'ikar is by chatas, havamina nazir lo yasamine, then I wouldn't say tam ki'ikar applies by nazir, b'shum the nazir mikachim lo yafinim. Maybe I say tam ki'ikar only applies by kachim, not by nazir. Because of Rachmana gabe nazir, if the Torah would have written by nazir tam keikar, havamina min nazir lo yafina, I wouldn't learn chatas tam keikar b'shum dechama isuri. Nazir is very strict. That even a pit is usher by nazir. So even though nazir seems a lighter isser, but in some ways the nazir is a chumra diga isser, that we asser things that are not foods. Even the pits become asser. Therefore, they could not learn tam keikar just from nazir. So now, where the Gemara is holding is one more last point is that the Gemara is holding that the Rabbanan learned tam keikar from nazir. But the Rabbanan is saying it wasn't just enough to learn tam keikar from nazir. You have to have another place like chatas to teach you tam keikar. Because nazir, I would not say that it could teach you kol Torah tam keikar, because nazir has a chumrah that even pits are also by nazir. So the Torah was makmid on the grapes of a nazir, so that's why it's a tam keikar. But maybe in other areas of the Torah you would not say tam keikar. That's why the Torah had to say by chatas also tam keikar. Now, Rabbi Kiva Amalach, Rabbi Kiva learned chatas to teach you heter mitzdaraf li'isser, and he also had nazir heter mitzdaraf li'isser. But he says you need both. They both not needed. If the Torah would tell you heter mitzdaraf li'isser from chatas loigam nazir mina, I would not learn nazir from it. The chulam mikachim loigamrinim. So I would not say heter mitzdaraf li'isser applies by nazir, because just because it applies by chatzis, I would not know that it applies by nazir, because nazir is a chulin and kachim is chatas. You wouldn't learn one from another. Let the Torah write hetem mitzaref leisser, and I learn from chatas from it. There are other isurim in the Torah, another halachas that you learn from the isser of nazir. There are other halachas of nazir, like batal b'shishim, things like that are learned from nazir. So nazir could be a good teacher. Nazir could teach you hetem mitzaref leisser. So why does the Torah write chatas hetem mitzaref leisser? According to Rabbi Kiva, to teach you that it only applies by these two things and not by anything else. So before we end, just want to say one thing. So where we're holding right now, Rabbi Akiva learned from Nazir, hetem mitzaref leisser, and by chatas hetem mitzaref leisser. Tam ke'ikar, he learned from kashering kalim. One more point. Rabbanan Amilach, Rabbanan says you're right. Rabbanan acquiesce. Chatas lehetem mitzaref leisser. B'chul mekachim le'gamrinim. I agree on you that chatas, you're right. Chatas teaches you hetem mitzaref leisser. It doesn't teach you tam ke'ikar. Mishras teaches you tam ke'ikar. Mekan atadon l'chol yisurim sheb'Torah. Mishras teaches you by nazir tam ke'ikar, and you learn tam ke'ikar m'kol ha'Torah kula. Where did Rabbi Kiva learn tam ke'ikar? From kashering kalim. Rabbanan learned kashering the tam ke'ikar from nazir, and hetem mitzaref leisser only applies by chatas, not by nazir. Rabbi Kiva, Tavayla hetem mitzaref leisser. I need nazir and chatas hetem mitzaref leisser. Rabbi Kiva says hetem mitzaref leisser is not only by chatas, but also by nazir. It applies only by chatas and nazir, and not by anywhere else in the Torah. But tam ke'ikar is a universal applied. Okay. Yes.
But I have a practical question. So, if